Welcome to College Football Monday, a Sons of Saturday live show. I'm your host, Pete B. I've got Sam Jesse here, as always, my trusty co-host. Sam, how you feeling tonight, buddy?
Feeling all right, man. It is like a bittersweet week of college football, right? Because it's such a big game that we're about to talk about and such a great matchup, but at the same time, it is coming to an end.
Yeah, we have the national championship set. It's Ohio State against Notre Dame. We're going to preview the game a little bit later in the show. We're going to get into what happened in the semifinals. We're going to go talk all the stuff that's going on with the Hokies. I mean, lots of commitments last week, Sam. I wasn't sure about doing a VT corner this week, just because I didn't know how much news there would be, and then we just kept getting commitments. So we got to at least catch people up and talk maybe even a little bit about the two guys we were getting impromptu in the last episode when we had Dan on, which was a lot of fun. I want to also let you guys know we're doing the national championship stream a week from tonight. Monday night, Ohio State against Notre Dame. The Sons of Saturday will be live on this channel doing a stream. We'll have guests all four quarters like we did last year, different guests in each quarter, some fun stuff that we're going to do throughout. So make sure you save a screen and, lock into us in addition to the national championship game. And yeah,
hey, Pete, you know who the defense coordinator is yet?
I don't. We were waiting for that Penn State thing to play itself out, have them out of the playoff, and maybe it was going to be Poindexter. Well, Penn State got poached, but it wasn't by us.
Yep. We'll talk about that later.
All right. Why don't you give us a cheers? We'll get into this thing.
This is a little bit of a different cheers because we're not quite at the finale of the season yet. This one is non-football related. It's just the dogs. Dogs are awesome. I love my dog. He's my best friend, and they're just awesome. So dogs is my cheers tonight.
Cheers. And I didn't say it out loud, but my cheers was to Bashal Tootin, who is a dog.
Dog.
Different kind of dog. But yeah, man, your dog's name is Baker, and named after the quarterback who unfortunately was ousted from the playoffs by those Commanders that so many of our listeners, I'm sure, were enjoying their first playoff win in a long time.
Yeah. I was rooting for Washington. Well, I was rooting for the over. That didn't happen, but great win for Washington. That's a really fun story to follow this year and just in the sport of football, I think. And Baker played hard though. I mean, that run he had where he trucked three DBs and kept going, that's why you love Baker Mayfield.
Yeah. Tough dude. And it was a long time coming for DC fans. You're right. As a Philly fan, I don't like the Commanders or what was the Redskins, but the Jaden Daniels story has been cool. Rookie of the year, all that kind of stuff. And he got his first playoff win in his first playoff game in his rookie season, which is pretty impressive. Now their reward is going to play the Lions, but enough about the NFL. The semifinal recap, Sam. Let's talk about the Orange Bowl. Notre Dame played Penn State. Penn State was +2 when we picked it, although that was waffling back and forth. I think when it came to game time, Penn State might have been favored by 1 or Notre Dame might have been favored by 1, but it was a very close spread. And watching the game after it was over, I felt like it was an instant classic. Did you have that feeling?
Yeah. I mean, that was iconic in a way, right? It was so perfect college football because it was a great game because the players weren't great. The players were just really good. You saw a lot of mistakes made in this game, specifically by the quarterbacks, but you never knew what was going to happen on the next play. And it was phenomenal television. Both teams played their heart out. Both defenses were amazing. Dude, Abdul Carter is insane.
Played with one arm.
He might be the best player I watched all year. Every game, he's a game wrecker. But Notre Dame just has this thing about them this year. And we're going to talk plenty about them. But, dude, they've had injuries, and it does not matter. Next guy up mentality. I believe Marcus Freeman at halftime said, and I believe this is quote, Riley Leonard said this is what he said, but history is written by the conquerors and we're holding the pen. I'm done. I'm done. That's it. This team of destiny, I don't think begins to describe what kind of run Notre Dame has been on since they lost to NIU.
Great game. Ton of drama. Penn State got out to a 10-0 lead, and it wasn't looking good for the Irish. They were getting stuffed left and right. Leonard had to leave the game. But backup quarterback, Steve Angeli, was angelic for those Jesus-loving Irish. ND took, let me see. He was able to lead ND down the field, I should say. 6 out of 7 passing, Sam. And he really gave them a spark, got that late field goal. It's not like that saved the day, but it gave Notre Dame just a little something. And even if we thought Leonard might not come back in the game, it's like, okay, well, maybe this guy can do it. Well, Leonard did come back. And the second half is where things got real interesting, with the Irish going 75 yards in 8 plays to tie the game on the Leonard run. They would add another touchdown and make it 17-10. Tremendous run by Jeremiah Love. It was hitting all the highlights. It was on Twitter, X, whatever. Just a punishing run, gets in the end zone. And he was amazing all second half long, too. Singleton would then score twice in a row to give the lead back to Penn State, 24-17. Notre Dame finally hits the big play, though, scoring on the 54-yard touchdown to Greathouse to tie the game. Easy for me to say. So they trade punts, and Penn State has the ball with under a minute left. And that was when disaster struck for Drew Aller. He throws the ball. It was kind of a slant ball. And the corner for Notre Dame made an amazing play. Was that Christian?
I believe so.
Christian
It was one of those, it was like a slight rollout left, had a couple, option 1 and option 2 were definitely to the left, both covered up. And you either got to throw it away or like tuck it and run. And he did the ultimate no-no as a quarterback. He threw it across his body over the middle late. And by that time, the DB for Notre Dame was ready for it.
Yeah.
Ran the route for the wide receiver, as they say, did a great job, made the play. Notre Dame picked up a few yards and then kicked the game-winning field goal. It does feel like that. It's unfortunate for the game to be lost on a mistake like that, I think, for Penn State. But at the same time, they had opportunities during that game to make big plays offensively, and they could not do it. And so a couple days later after the fact, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this, but I feel like Franklin should have just kneeled the clock out at that point, because they had not completed a pass to a wide receiver all game long. And now you got to go like 60 yards on a very good defense. I just felt like it was such a impossible task for Penn State that night. Yeah. I know they have a decent kicker, or he's been decent the last few weeks, but just it felt like a recipe. Now looking back at it, it felt like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, but he hadn't been great in the game, but he hadn't been really bad yet either. There's 38 seconds left. You can't play for overtime. Is no guarantee for anybody. It's such a wild card, and you only need where they were on the field. Yeah, they were in their own end, but maybe if you get 40 yards, you have a chance for a field goal, maybe 35. And so I don't blame Franklin for trying for with 38 seconds left, but like, it was a really bad mistake. Now, it was a great play by the corner, but it never touched the wide receiver's hands. Like,
no, it was much more awful mistake than it was great play.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the run. I guess I don't. Let's finish the stuff with the game, and then we'll talk about the bigger picture. But like, the no wide receiver having a catch thing is crazy, and that was it was such a big part of the game. If you think about, it came down to third down because Notre Dame was 11 of 17, Penn State was 3 of 11, and the big plays. There were 3 plays. There wasn't that many big plays, but there were 3 plays for Notre Dame. One to Greathouse, Williams, and the pass to Evans that were all over 30 yards. Those were all longer than Penn State's longest play. Penn State never got a big play. Their longest play was like 27 yards. That might have been the one to Warren. But the big plays and third down were how Notre Dame won this game, and just an amazing second half. And I know people were asking, like, what was the halftime speech? He must have said something incredible. I'm sure he said a lot of different things, but ultimately they just played the way they played all year. And it wasn't like it was huge. It was a one score game. It was a touchdown at half, thanks to Angeli.
It was. There was this like media narrative that Penn State was running away with that game. It was 10-3 at halftime, and Notre Dame had the ball coming out in the second. Like, that game that was a very predictable first half score in a way.
It was. It kind of felt a little bit. It wasn't as bad as this, but like, the Eagles were up 10-0 on Green Bay. But it felt like it was 40-0.
It felt like it could have been 40.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And this felt somewhere like it could have been 20-0, but it wasn't. It was 10-3. And they were able, like Leonard was just a wrecking ball again and again. He had 18 carries in the game, kept going up the middle with it, and Love did enough when it came down to it to give them the edge. They weren't even sure if he was going to be able to really go. And he gives us the best highlight of the game, probably. And so what a cool game, a hard-hitting game. You mentioned Abdul Carter, 2 TFL and a sack, 5 sacks for the Penn State defense. Notre Dame did enough with their left tackle going out, with another offensive lineman going out, chipping Abdul Carter, just enough stuff that Saban was talking about at halftime. Like, you got to do something to stop this guy. And they did just enough. And they end up winning their 13th straight to go to the national championship.
It's crazy. And we're talking about this Notre Dame team. Like, they have no offense and they just battering ram quarterback and stuff. They're 18th in the country in yards per play. Yeah, actually, let me make sure I'm sorting on that right. They're 18th in adjusted EPA per play on offense, I know. But yards per play, they're at 6.75 yards per play.
Yeah, it's a top 25, top 20 offense.
Yeah, like they can move the ball. And they've been able to do it. And they don't have a number, well, like say Faison's probably their number 1 wide receiver, but they have 2 really good tight ends. They have 2 really good running backs. They have a running quarterback. Like, they have all the weapons they need in order to move the ball down the field and in order to score. And I think Penn State kind of just, it's almost like they ran out of gas in that second half defensively. Like, they weren't making as many plays. And then you saw the big touchdown pass to Greathouse was on just a slip, and that slip probably doesn't happen if the defense isn't on the field for pretty much the entire third quarter and you have your legs under you a little bit more,
Yeah, when you consider the fact that Notre Dame had those 17 third downs, like, that's a lot of time on the field. 17 third downs is a ton, and they converted well over 50%. So good on Notre Dame. They get it done. It's a pretty devastating blow for Penn State fans with the way it ended and everything. Awesome season. And I think, James Franklin gets tons of crap, and he didn't beat the top 5 team, and he's got the terrible record and whatever. But I do think there was some exercising of the demons for Franklin. I don't think it's all bad for him after this season.
I mean, Indiana and Boise State were 2 very big wins, right? Those are
not Indiana. SMU.
Excuse me. Those are big wins against good teams, like really good teams. And both of them were in dominant fashion. And he had his team in position to win this game multiple times in the fourth quarter. Yeah. Like, multiple times they were there. And
do you think he lost the game? Like, I don't think that narrative is like, oh, James can't get it done. Like, I didn't really put that loss on him. Now, he is the coach, and there were things throughout the game that maybe he could have done differently, but like, it was a pretty well-coached game on both sides.
Yeah, and I think too, like, Penn State lost that game on, obviously it's 60 minutes of football, but they lost that game on a defensive back just slipping on the turf and on a quarterback doing something that since he was a little kid in Pee Wee has been told not to do. Like, that's why those are the 2 plays. Like, if those 2 plays don't happen, Penn State wins the game. Yeah. And I think you can talk about how they were unable to go up multiple scores to go into halftime. But the reason they weren't up multiple scores going into halftime was because Drew Aller had a wide open touchdown pass and, threw it at the back heel of his running back from 5 yards away. I don't know how he managed to do that. Their defense backup quarterback for Notre Dame comes in and they just let him march down the field, get into field goal range. Like, there were points throughout the game, but if you look in that fourth quarter, Notre Dame was up a touchdown. They needed one more stop and they would have ran out the clock after that and getting the ball back. Couldn't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. They're very even teams. Like, these are very similar style of teams. They're very even in terms of talent levels, like, just all across the board. And it came down to a couple plays here and there, and Notre Dame made the extra plays. Let's go back to the improbability of Notre Dame getting to this point, because it's not just that they were 1-1 after 2 games. It was that the one loss was to a G5, which no one thought was particularly good before the season. And we kind of knew that they weren't good a few weeks after the game. But to be 1-1 and just run the table, like, you have there were people saying like they can't get in the playoff like 2 weeks in. And I even talked about, Josh Pate put out his power ratings after week 2 or whatever he wants to call them, rankings or not ratings. And Notre Dame was 14th. And I remember this because I was having a back and forth with Shelton about it. And I'm like, I get it. It's a rating system, but it's based on preseason. And we just saw them lose to NIU. So like, in what rating system should they be 14th? And in fact, they should have been 2.
Yeah.
But like, it is so crazy. Them going on this run at that point, like, it's not a Cinderella story because it's Notre Dame, but it is as close to a Cinderella story as you can get for a blue blood.
Yeah, no, for a blue blood, right? Like, I think that's the critical topic. And you look, this team, they didn't just win some of these games. I know they didn't play great competition, but no one even came close to challenging them after that NIU game. And they also went down to Texas A&M and played a mostly healthy Texas A&M team and won that game by 10 points. So, I mean, it's been, to end the regular season, they had, I think, probably like 8 of their last 9 games, they won by 3+ scores. They just dominated everybody they played, but I think their schedule was so light that we didn't really see it as much, but they were just so dominant. And we now we see like their recipe for success is so repeatable, right? They can do it every game, no matter the team they're going up against, no matter the matchup. Like, they feel to me kind of like Michigan did last year.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter who's on the other side of the field. They're going to challenge them up to that other team's potential.
Because they're so physical, you're saying?
They're
their mentality. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they can win in different ways. Like, Riley Leonard can throw the ball. He's not a bad passer. I mean, he's not a great passer, but he can throw the ball.
Yep.
They just haven't had to, because they've either been winning by so much they just want to run the clock out, or they play one of the top defenses in the country and they get a EPA per rush game that's in the 60th percentile of the last 2 years, and they're just running the ball up and down on them. Like, I think it's going to be a really interesting matchup with Ohio State. It's really, really interesting.
Like, I wonder though, is this iteration of Notre Dame better than that Ian Book team that went to the college football playoff? Like, what I wonder about Notre Dame, and we can discuss it when we get to the national championship talk, is like, the schedule was not great during the regular season. I'm not saying they beat nobody because they got 11 wins, but it was not as hard as some other schedules. And then they get to play Indiana, which some people thought was a fraud. They get to beat Georgia with their backup quarterback, and they beat Penn State, who might have had the easiest path to get there. I'm just wondering, like, this side of the bracket was the weaker side of the bracket, in my opinion. Like, there's no Texas, there's no Oregon, there's no Ohio State, there's no Tennessee, there's no Arizona State.
Well, like, there was Georgia.
There was Georgia, but it's with a guy who I don't like. Stockton's fine, but he wasn't top end Carson Beck, and so it's Georgia. It's the name Georgia, but it wasn't the Georgia of a couple years ago. It wasn't, and we know that.
No, that's fair.
And so, like, Notre Dame's good, Penn State's good. I'm not saying they're not good. I'm just like, are they materially better? Like, this is a very strange year in college football.
It is because I think there were 3 teams this season who, if you looked at their rosters, had potential to be 2020 Alabama, 2021 Georgia. Look back a little further at some of the peak USC teams, like elite, dominant, stocked with NFL talent across the board. They're just going to run away with the thing. And that was Ohio State, Texas, and Oregon. Ohio State sometimes plays like that and sometimes doesn't. Oregon played like that a lot of the year. They didn't play like that in the Rose Bowl. And then Texas just couldn't figure it out quite offensively. They had the potential, and you saw the potential. They couldn't play that way. And I think that has created this really interesting season where, instead of 2 Goliaths playing in the national title, we have uber talented, really good Ohio State team who has this really, really high ceiling, but their floor is like losing to Michigan and like almost losing to a Texas team that hasn't looked great. And then we have this Notre Dame team who seems to be playing at their ceiling week after week after week. It is a really interesting national title matchup because I don't think we have seen one quite like this in the playoff era. Yeah. Like I think it's either been Goliath versus Goliath, or it's been like a TCU team or Washington team that just doesn't have the horses to keep up with their opponent.
Yeah. And the question of whether this is a better Notre Dame team than the 2018 team or the 2020 team, it's an impossible question to answer. Yeah. I just there's no Chase Claypool, there's no Boykin.
That might be good.
Well, yeah, his narrative has changed since college, but anyway, great team, great game. They had to beat 3 teams to get to the title. They are very, very good. They deserve to be there, and I'm excited to see what they do in the championship game.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk Cotton Bowl. Ohio State against Texas. Texas 6-point underdogs. I was on Ohio State, and I felt fairly confident about it. But this did not start the way Ohio State Oregon started. It was just 7-0 Buckeyes after the first, and then there were 8 straight punts between the two teams up until, what was it? Right the last minute, Texas scored on the pass to Blue, and then it only took 16 seconds for Ohio State to put up another score right before the half, the pass to Travion Henderson.
Oh, my goodness. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about it.
So it's 14-7 at the half. All the wind has been taken out of Texas's sails, but it didn't stop them from fighting in that third quarter. They managed to tie the game, but Ohio State put together a magical drive in the fourth. 13 plays, 88 yards. They utilized Judkins again and again. He scored on the 1-yard run to make it 21-14, and Texas still didn't go away. They drive 65 yards down to the 1-yard line. First and goal, nothing from the 1. Second and goal from the 1, loss of 7, and then it was third and goal. And that's when the play happened. You get Sawyer back there, sack, scoop, score, the game's over. And that was all she wrote. But Texas fought better than I expected. Honestly, I know that Ohio State won by 2 touchdowns, but it was still, the margin was what I expected, but not the fashion.
It felt like this was going to be a game that Ohio State let Texas hang around and keep coming back. And you did feel like whoever has the ball last is going to win this game. Mm-hmm. And we were really close to that happening. Ohio State's goal line defense has been stupid good, breaking the rules of football good. And I think that is something to keep in mind, that was a Ohio State strength, ungodly strength that Ohio State has, versus a horrific weakness that Texas has had all year, and that's scoring close to the end zone.
It's crazy how it never went away. They could never overcome.
No, they couldn't. And I think it's a lot because of the style of offense that they run. The plays take so long to develop sometimes that you just don't have enough room. There's not enough physical room on the field to run a lot of their bread and butter plays in the passing game. I do feel kind of bad for Texas because, dude, I'll just ask it. If Arch Manning plays that game, do they win? They might, because Ewers didn't do anything for over half that game. And there were plays to be made, and they had no X factor on offense. And
I don't think so, but maybe. And I know in this instance, they didn't win. So, it would have been tough because he hasn't played, this is such a difficult opponent. The Ohio State defense is crazy.
It's an NFL defense.
Yeah.
All 11 of those players are going to play in the NFL. That's not hyperbole.
I can't wait to see that in a couple years to see if that's true, because it very well might be. They bought this team, and I mean that in the truest sense.
Yes.
Yeah, they bought this team to do exactly what it's done. And Chip Kelly and Knowles and Ryan Day have gotten their crap together, and here they are in the national title game after winning this one. Neither team could run much. That's something Ohio State had the edge, and they actually ran for an okay average, but when they play Notre Dame, will Travion Henderson be able to get loose? Will Judkins be able to run for more than 4 yards a carry or whatever it was? I think they will, but that Notre Dame defense, Penn State, you're not going to find a better running game than what Penn State puts out there.
No, and Penn State was able to run the ball pretty well.
They were
in that game overall, but they didn't have the massive explosive runs, and that's something that they usually get. Penn State did have 5 explosive plays in the game, but a lot of them were on passes like 15, 20-yard passes to Tyler Warren.
Yeah, and I wasn't classifying that as explosive either. Like explosive to me is 30 plus. But yeah, I guess whatever. But
point proven that Penn State wasn't able to just run, move the ball down the field. No. I don't think Ohio State's going to be able to do that either.
I just was expecting, I'm not trying to go back to the Penn State game, but they were punishing Notre Dame's defense. But Notre Dame's defense was also dishing it out, and they never gave up. Like you said, they always made the tackle. When it looked like Allen was about to break through, they made the tackle. And that's what they're going to do to Ohio State. So the difference in this game was Abuka, a couple of pass plays here or there. Howard was more efficient than Ewers, like he just was. He wasn't amazing, but he was more efficient and he played pretty well. And there were 4 sacks and 9 TFL for the Ohio State defense. It was the defense, and it was just what they have on the outside, the extra weapons that Howard has at his disposal that basically none of the other teams in the playoff had at this point. Texas was close, but no one has what they have.
Yeah, and Thomas Train put it in the chat. Ohio State dropped a few passes they normally catch. That's true. They do, but also again, this is what makes this so great is as good as these teams are, they're college football players and they're going to make mistakes like that in big games. And so I think that is something that kind of evens the playing field in terms of the skill positions in this matchup between Ohio State and Notre Dame. Is we've seen games where these stud Ohio State wide receivers get shut down. There have been multiple games this season where Jeremiah Smith does nada. Yeah, multiple games. Michigan shut him down.
Some of that
Texas shut him down.
Was on Michigan's job, but was it also because of their lack of getting them involved? And in this game, Jeremiah Smith didn't do much.
3 yards.
Yeah. So it's possible to shut him down if you want to go after him, but someone's going to be out there and be open.
Someone else is going to be open. Yeah. And to get a little X's and O's, Notre Dame's a really heavy man coverage team. What seems to work best against Ohio State is just a cover 4, cover 3 zone where you're putting those safeties back and you're saying, you're not going to beat us deep. Try to beat us in here. And we're going to let our really fast athletic linebackers rally to make the tackle. Notre Dame has the players to be able to do that. Will they change strategies going into this game? If they don't, I'm going to say good offense beats good defense every single time. If they do, there's a lot of film on there on how to stop Ohio State, right? And Notre Dame's the team that has an extra day to prepare as well.
They do, and they have an excellent defense, an excellent pass defense, which may be more important for them in this game. They have the number 1 pass defense in the country in terms of opposing passer rating. So I definitely give them a fighting shot. Let's save some of our thoughts on the Natty until the end when we kind of finish previewing the game. You had some questions, though, just in terms of bigger picture college football stuff you wanted to get into before we do VT Corner.
Yeah, so let's go back to the Notre Dame Penn State game. So if you don't know the nitty-gritty of it with the payouts are made for if a team wins a game in the playoff or makes the playoff, wins a game in the playoff, they are paid a portion of the TV contract revenue. And so if you're a team who won this semifinal game and you made the championship game, you're paid about $20 million. I think it's $20.1 million gets paid out to your conference. And then the conference disperses it amongst the teams however they see fit. Notre Dame's not in a conference last time I checked, Pete.
Nope.
And so guess who gets $20.1 million?
Yeah, that would be the Irish and just the Irish.
And this is the biggest TV contract for championships in the history of the sport, correct? It's never been higher.
Not that I'm aware of.
Is this the most financially lucrative win in college football history?
It might
Because they're
be.
also going to get money from playing in the Natty as well.
Yeah, it very well may be in terms of like a tangible dollar amount. Could you find like is Boise State's win over Oklahoma potentially have been more lucrative over time?
Potentially, but
I mean,
this is
they put Ian Johnson on the cover of NCAA.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
But like in terms of a one game win, you might be right. The BCS payouts at one time were very substantial. Like you would
Yeah.
get like 17 mil a school, and Notre Dame has been in the CFP twice.
Yeah.
And so they've gotten some big paychecks in the past, but in terms of a single game, I think you're probably right.
Yeah, I mean, and to me too, looking on the intangibles of this, I think this Notre Dame for the last probably like decade it felt like they were just behind the big boys in the SEC and Ohio State and maybe even like Clemson in terms of recruiting numbers, in terms of NIL numbers, in terms of I can't say national prestige, but like team that's going to get game day all the time or get the ABC Prime. And I know they have their own TV contract with NBC, but it felt like they were a step behind the biggest of the big boys. Now you beat Penn State, you go on this great run, you have a shot at a Natty. Like this might be the game to bring them back up to the elite of the elite as a program.
And they have one of the youngest, best coaches in the sport, it would seem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, this, like, how many kids aren't, if they get really involved in the transfer portal and they take a step up in NIL, dude, they could get on that level of Georgia, what Alabama has been. Ohio State is at. Like, they could get there. I think this could be it's weird because it's Notre Dame. It's like the most storied program in the country. So it's weird saying this, but like if you look at the college football playoff era, they could be the team that takes that next step into the like Goliath category of college football.
And it's funny. Yeah, you're right. It is funny to say that because Brian Kelly achieved what no coach for 30 years could achieve, like getting them back into like the Final Four. Getting a 12-0 season and playing for the national title in 2012, 2013. But he couldn't win the big one. He got embarrassed in the one game, and then they got knocked out in the first round of the playoff. But like they've been knocking on the door, but I don't think they've ever been taken seriously as like a national title, like actual contender. And that is the next iteration where every year you go in, you're like, Notre Dame can win it all. I don't think people have been thinking Notre Dame can win it all, except for maybe like diehard Irish fans for the past.
Except for like every other household in the Midwest. But yeah,
well,
yeah. I know it's true. Like their recruiting numbers and the players they're putting out to NFL, like they haven't had the skill position talent that some of these other teams have had. Like they've had great offensive line for forever. But
I also think like they've been recruiting at a level that was very congruent with like Clemson, right? But Clemson got Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. Like Notre Dame never had that extra special quarterback. Ian Book is good. Even going back to Brady Quinn, who was the quarterback? Who took them to the one in 2020? That was Ian Book, but
that was Ian Book.
2018, was it also Book? Might have been. Either way, they haven't had that transcendent quarterback. Not they're Michael Vick, they're Lamar Jackson.
Well, are you calling Deshaun Kaiser not transcendent?
I'm sorry, I'm besmirching Deshaun Kaiser. He's catching strays here. But yeah, man, I agree. And someone said, I think it was Mike McDaniel said, like, Marcus Freeman could level up Notre Dame. And I'm like, they're already like, no one has had success there since 1988 when they won their national championship. Not like the national level of success. Brian Kelly did it. Leveling up from that is nearly impossible. And he might do it. Like he really might do it. Now he's still young in his career. We'll see. Like it might be too early to tell. Is he this good? Has he caught lightning in a bottle? Like I think he is very, very good. But you only get to the GOAT status or top 5 coach in the sport status by doing it and doing it and doing it. And so I'm doing it well. So we'll just have to
and
see.
my next question, which is, I think, well, let me see how I want to order these. Yeah, this will be the one before we get into the Natty preview. Is having a battering ram power running quarterback who can do the other stuff, is that becoming more of a recipe for success than the throw the ball for 3,500 yards in a season quarterback? Because I'm seeing a lot of programs, if they need to take that step up, that seems to be the X factor in modern college football. Because I think there's just so many guys who are good at wide receiver. There's so many good running backs. And it just feels like if you have a quarterback who can just like run read option and run through dude's face, it completely changes the game.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look back at the last few national title quarterbacks. It's like J.J. McCarthy, Stetson Bennett. I guess the one before that would have also been Stetson Bennett. and then,
but they're not like,
who was the year before Georgia? That was that. Was it
Bama.
Alabama? Was it Bryce Love?
Bama, yeah. And then you had Joey before that.
Yeah, and Joe Burrow.
But that's different. I mean, that's in terms
of what you're talking about, though. Like you're talking about a Joe Burrow type who is versus a Howard or a Leonard or JJ McCarthy. Like, and JJ didn't really like run like these two guys,
but just a gamer, right? Gamer, like it seems like these programs trying to go out and find the next the next Joe Burrow type quarterback at the college level. I just feel like it's not going to happen, and you just need to go find the rah-rah. Baker Mayfield put up a ton of passing yards, but the guy who's just going to like run through somebody's face and not care about it. The guy who's just going to be a gamer and lead his team, because I don't see a lot of programs taking that step up to the national level by just having this beautiful passing offense with a pro style quarterback. You're just not seeing it as much.
You're not seeing it as much because it's extremely rare. Like a Joe Burrow, a Bryce Love, even a CJ Stroud, like those guys are rare. They're top 5.
You mean Bryce Young?
I'm sorry. I keep saying
Bryce Young. Bryce Love was a good running back at Stanford.
He was a good. That's my bad. Bryce Young. Yes. Thank you for getting that straight. But those guys are the rarities. Like in some ways, stacking your roster like Georgia does or Michigan did with tons of 4 and 5 stars on defense and gives you a bigger margin for error at quarterback. And so all you're seeing is something that we've seen for a long time. The teams with the most talent win. And for the most part, that's what we're doing. And then the gaming quarterbacks filter down those 10 teams with the most talent. The best gaming quarterbacks are like the ones that are in the hunt, because Cam Ward didn't make the final 12. If Cam Ward made the final 12, maybe he'd be in the national title, but they don't play defense. So probably not. So
or full football games.
I think it really comes down to, Sam, like, it's just the makeup of the team. Like some years it's going to be Deshaun Watson and a team that's maybe not as elite and just has an amazing defensive coordinator and Brent Venables and some dudes like those 4 horsemen that played D-line for Clemson that year. Like it was a perfect storm. It was an amazing season. But, then there's going to be other years where you stack the deck on defense and you've got Riley Leonard as your quarterback, and I don't think we can draw any conclusions from it. It's just like stack talent. And one of those teams is going to win. Sometimes it's because they have the transcendent quarterback. Sometimes it's because they're loaded everywhere else.
That's fair enough. Does the sport of college football run through the Midwest?
It's crazy, man, because 5 years ago, I wouldn't think we'd be in that spot where the Final Four came from Penn State, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and then, Texas, which is the SEC school, which wasn't even in the SEC 2 years ago. So we literally had like no true SEC schools in this Final Four. We shouldn't have had any SEC in last year's Final Four because Bama got in over Florida State. If Jordan Travis doesn't bust his knee, like they're in. So it's funny how the NIL and the portal, we've talked about it several times, how it seems to be evening things out. And with the conference being so difficult in the SEC, I don't know. And this might have just been a weird year, right? Because there's plenty of good teams in the SEC, but the Midwest they've got some good coaches right now, and they cycled up at the right time. Like, I think this is a rarity. Like, I don't think we're going to see Notre Dame, for all intents and purposes, is a Big Ten team. Like, they play like one, they look like one, they're in the same area. So you more or less have 3 Big Ten teams in the Final Four. I don't think that's happening very often. I really don't.
I think it is interesting that I think there is this level of cannibalization that happening in the Southeast. And I think there is also, some of these dudes in the Midwest, I know not all their players are from there, but if you look at recruiting rankings, like there are some of these guys that are playing for Ohio State, playing for Notre Dame that you're like, how is this guy not a 5-star? Like, he's insane. He was insane in high school. And I was like, how is he getting ranked under what some of these other guys are? And like, why isn't our top 5 to start the year? Why isn't that include Ohio State and Notre Dame? And, if Michigan can figure out quarterback like Michigan all the time, like, I don't know. This is back-to-back years where clearly the best team is from that region.
Yeah.
And I just think it's an interesting geographic switch in the sport because it's been so Southeast and like deep Southeast too. Like Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana has been the hub of the sport for well over a decade now. It used to be in the early 2000s. Yeah. And like the early to mid 2000s, it was Texas and Southern California. That's where all your players came from. That's where the best teams were. Then it moved to the Southeast. You saw Florida State be really good as well, South Carolina. And now it's coming back up to the Midwest, Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame. Indiana all of a sudden is good. Like it can happen anywhere.
There are 2 teams in Indiana that made the playoff.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's a really interesting development for the sport. As it moves geographically. It was so Southern centric for a while now.
And I think some of that, Sam, it's the cycles of high school football too. Like Ohio and Pennsylvania still play really good high school football. A lot of the Northeast, like New York, even up to Michigan, like the high school football, we've seen it filter down to the South. Like they invented air conditioning in the 60s and 70s. People started moving south and like there were more population. Football started becoming a bigger thing. Like we saw the transition to the South. And I'm not saying it's coming all the way back, but I just think the talent gets spread out and the states that still play really good high school football, Texas, Ohio, Pennsylvania, every now and again, they're going to produce these teams that are killers. Now, I know not every player on those teams is from those states, but like a majority is. And high school football still matters. Like when it comes to like who you can bring, who you're evaluating, and there might be a bias down in the South when it comes to the 2-4-7s and the on-3s. And that's why we see more 5-stars go to the South. And maybe Ohio State or Penn State is hitting on evaluations because those camps aren't as highly looked at by the recruiting services. There's a lot of factors at play, but it is wild to me that we didn't have a true old school SEC team in this Final Four.
Yeah. Will be interesting to look at as we preview next year. I think the narrative might be, does the SEC climb back to the top of college football? I can see it now written up in Athlon.
Yeah. And we got a Southern school in Clemson who's going to be damn good too.
Really, really good. Really good.
All right. College Football Monday is brought to you by Roback. You guys know Roback, the performance activewear designed for those who crave activity. You can use code 2DBT to get 20% off your order. If you've already used it, use it again. Grab some golf shirts. I know we're a little bit ways off of spring, but golf season is coming. You can get the quarter zips for this cold time of year, joggers, tees, hoodies, everything. Go to roback.com, load up your cart, use code 2DBT, Roback Crave Activity. Let's go to VT Corner, Sam.
As
I said at the top of the show, number of commitments come in. No, we do not have a DC yet. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end of this segment. But we got a 2025 high school commit last week. Wide receiver Cameron Sparks, 4-star in the composite, second highest ranked recruit in the class for 2025, according to the composite rankings. He's an 87 on 247, so a little bit lower there, but he's 6'3", 205 from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Was a 5-star as a freshman. And maybe he didn't grow the way they thought, didn't project the way he thought, but he's still a 4-star in the composite. And you look at the wide receivers in this class now, the top 3 recruits in this class, in the composite, all wideouts.
Yeah. If there's a position to stack, I think that's one of them, because you can play 4 on the field at a time, 5 even. Virginia Tech doesn't do that too much, but you can. I think it shows, though, that Virginia Tech's best recruiter by a mile is Fontel Mines.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they have gotten really good at selling this offensive scheme to wide receivers. I think they've gotten really good at
what are they selling?
I mean,
the wide receivers didn't have a great year.
They didn't. They did. But I also, there's Tech started 3 different quarterbacks.
Yep.
They played good defense. We wouldn't have said that coming into this year, right? So I think Virginia Tech is really good at selling the wide receiver spot.
Fontel is working magic.
I mean, he's working absolute magic. They're doing a damn good job recruiting that position. I also think there are some players who they did recruit in the previous 2 cycles or so that are being filtered out,
sure,
one way or another, and that's just naturally what happens. And I think you kind of have to stack that position group, knowing, hey, some aren't going to like it here and they're going to transfer. Some aren't going to be as good as we thought they're going to get out of here. Some are going to be better than we thought and maybe get out of here. You can't be left with only like 3 good wide receivers, because no disrespect, but that's how you end up with Caleb Smith being your wide receiver 1, right? And that's not good. So you need to have, and mention Justin Fuente, take a drink, but he was absolutely correct when he says, like, you need 7 or 8 really high level playable guys at wide receiver in modern football. So
yeah,
I'll take my drink for the
that was after we just talked about, pounding quarterback and running game, but like the wide receiver position and having dynamic players on the outside, I think we'll see in the Natty, is extremely important. And we do need that cream to rise to the top. We need better quarterback play. And I just can't believe the guys he keeps bringing in. And we're going to talk about another wide receiver right now, Donovan Green, that's coming in. And I'm not so sure Fontel had a ton to do with this. I'm sure he was involved, but I think this was a Sean Quinn thing that he kind of stayed on for a number of years. But Donovan Green played for Wake Forest for a while now, Sam. His freshman year was 2019. Commits to the Hokies on Friday. He's a 0.86 in the transfer rating, for what it's worth. The transfer ratings, take him or leave him, but it kind of gives you at least a framework for what we're coming in here. 4-star coming out of high school in North Carolina from the Mount Airy area. 1,853 yards in his career, but hampered by injuries. I think he missed the entire 21 season, but he's had multiple 500-yard seasons. Older guy. He's going to be like 24 this year. And that is something that this room needed.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely need some veteran leadership, because all their other veteran leadership graduated. And I think you're also looking at this class that Virginia Tech is bringing in for 2025. Cameron Sparks isn't going to have the spring semester of play, I don't think. So, you don't feel great about him immediately making an impact. Micah Matthews, I think I'm going to lean towards he's more of a baseball player than he is a football player at this point. Just looking at who they're bringing in and stuff like that.
I wonder how that's going to shake out.
Yeah, I do too. I think that'll be really fascinating this spring. And then you have, who's the other wide receiver they brought in? Jaden Anderson from Green Run is probably a candidate for a red shirt just from a number standpoint.
And Peterkin.
So you have Peterkin too. So you needed somebody who has college experience to be on this team, because you're getting Tucker Holloway back, and that's great. We'll see what he's like post injury, but other than that, you have Aiden Green and
they were bringing in Selden to play wideout, but Selden's never played wideout. So
I mean, they're gonna have some options there. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how they handle that room.
We're up to a lot. We got numbers in there now, man. If you
look at numbers in there, got numbers at running back too.
Numbers at running back. And let's talk about the numbers at safety. because that's the other guy we brought in late last
One of
week.
them will work out.
Christian Ellis from New Mexico, 0.85 transfer rating. That makes 4 transfer safeties, just transfer safeties. We also have Robinson in the freshman class coming in. So that's 5 safeties coming in for 2025, which makes me think, Sam, someone on the roster ain't going to be around.
Well, I think we saw what the ball skills of the defensive backs in that Minnesota game was not promising. And I think you saw Lovett made a few plays. Other than that, it was not great. And I think you also saw, it's a really dangerous game to play freshman defensive backs because
they've done it twice in a row.
Yeah,
they 2 years in a row, I should say.
And it's, there's Reddish and, Mose Phillips both played well. Reddish will be starting next year, and I think he'll do a very good job. But there were points where they were just lost on the football field multiple times. I mean, you saw go back a couple of years to Jalen Jones as a defensive back, just as a converted defensive back, but young guy. There were plays where he was running the wrong way. Like the ball was running one way, he was running the other.
You need
veterans.
Yeah. And when you bring in 4 veterans, 1 freshman, and have some veterans in house, like someone is going to be decent, right, Sam? Like someone's got to be decent. I think we're up to 8 or 9 safeties right now.
Yeah. And you also need guys. I mean, a lot of these guys coming out of high school, they're not physically the most, scary looking guys. Like Najee Harrell, a cornerback from Green Runners in the freshman class, who's listed at 5'10", 165. Jordan Krim, who's listed at 6'1", 175. Like some of these guys need to put on bulk, and you're not going to put on 25 pounds of healthy weight in 4 months or something, So some of these guys who are bringing in the younger guys, they're going to need a couple years to get to where we need them to get to.
I also think I love the fact that Reddish is here and his brother came in this year. I'm speculating, but I feel like Nick Reddish is one of the extra scholarships. Like if we had 85, maybe he wouldn't get one, but since we have more than that, he's getting one. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And that's the position to kind of one of those positions to bulk up at, because look, a couple years ago, those guys get injured all the time. They're not the biggest guys out there on the field, and they're coming up and making tackles against tight ends and running. They can get targeting calls. Like you have to have depth at the wide receiver and defensive back positions. And I also wonder, some of these guys, they come in as safety as a freshman. Okay, they bulk up a little bit. We can put them at star or whip or whatever.
Or they don't bulk up and they become a corner. You need 5 starting defensive backs these days. And depending on our DC, maybe all the time if we move to 4-2-5. And so, you know what, Sam? This just occurred to me that we have very limited stars on this roster. Stars as in the star position.
What if we just didn't have the star
What if we just didn't have a star position?
That's interesting, Pete. I'm glad you brought that up. Because God, we couldn't get 3 linebackers to start with no matter what. So let's just play 2 of them.
We might end up moving to a 4-2-5 with our new coach, even though we don't know who it is yet.
I think you do. I just think
they do. You're saying this?
Yeah. I mean, we have 3 years of looking at Virginia Tech try to put together this defense of Brent Pryce, and from a Jimmy's and Joe's standpoint, they just can't figure it out. For whatever reason, they can't figure it out. And I think unless they stumble upon 2 or 3 really good linebackers between now and August 31st, probably need to switch up.
So you just think we're going to be playing nickel all the time, or whatever the name will be, bandit, something
like that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's move on to Jordan Bass, because he also committed, and this might be the biggest of the 4 I've already talked about tonight, Sam. Linebacker Jordan Bass from Pittsburgh University, not the area. He has no transfer rating as of now, but this was a former 4-star from the state of Virginia, a 93 on 247 in the class of 2023. He's still pretty young, from Hampton, top 5 player in the state. Didn't rack up many stats at Pittsburgh, but this is one of those APR situations we're hoping, right? He comes home,
hoping so.
Gets some playing time at a position of need. people are really excited about bringing Bass in.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you're hoping for, that the talent is still there, and he was just behind some really good defensive players at Pitt. That's very likely. Pitt's a program who almost exclusively likes to play veterans on the defensive side of the ball. So I think you're taking a gamble that this is a guy who has a ton of talent, was just sitting behind veteran and talented defensive players. They need him to be really good. Like, let's face it, they need him to be a 4-star caliber player.
They do, because we brought in Gabe Williams as a 4-star, and he was going to play the star, but now his injury is serious, and he's dealing with so much.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what that future will hold. And Clatterball comes in. So this class, both transfer and out of high school, like, this is our highest rated linebackers yet, right? Like, in terms of like what we've had since Brent Pry got here.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it's exciting, but whoever that linebacker coach is going to be going forward, I need to know that. I mean, I don't need to know it, but like, they need to know it. He needs to be good. They need to get these guys in the right position. The defense coordinator, like, I'm dying for good Mike play. You know that. Like, Dan was talking about how he needed Mike play more than Jesus last week.
Yeah, probably do. I mean, unless Jesus comes back and can fill the B gap really well, then we probably need, like, it just hasn't worked at Virginia. Like, they've tried a bunch of different guys at different positions, and they haven't gotten consistent play out of it. I hope whoever the defensive coordinator is brings some fresh ideas at the least. Yeah, because it seemed like so many times, I don't want to harp on last year, but like so many times last year, it's like a team would find 1 or 2 plays that worked and they just run them over and over and over again. We couldn't get out of it.
The trolls are here.
We need good players and good coaches. Great take. It is a very good take, Pete. I'll be honest with you. Like, I don't know if like big, strong, fast was the issue with Virginia Tech defense last year. You know, I definitely think it was other off the field things. So,
yeah. But I'm excited about Bass coming in, man. It's a huge pickup between the Spark. Like, going back to Sparks real quick, it's January. There's already been signing day, early signing period. We're not the type of school that typically brings in like a home run hitter, like in the recruiting class in January this late. To grab a composite 4-star on January 12th or whatever it was, like, that's huge. I know it's at a position where like we have a lot of talent, but I'll take that all day. So people can knock on the he's only an 87 on 2-4. 87, that's where we've made our bread and butter, man. Like, we need 87s.
Gritty 3 stars. Bring them all in.
We mentioned James, I think it's Jonkum, on the last show. His commitment happened while we were recording. He's going to play defensive end. And you had talked about his PFF grades being super high. Well, he was a tremendous pass rusher. And from the linebacker position, maybe he was playing a hybrid.
Both. He played both at Eastern Michigan. Yeah.
Okay. But for us, he's going to be under JC Price's tutelage, playing defensive end. And then we also added, what was the Arias Nash.
Yep.
And he's going to play defensive tackle. So we got 2 different defensive linemen. And I think when we were talking to Dan, he said something like, I think he might be an All-American FCS. I don't think he was All-American FCS, but he did have like 12 and a half tackles for loss. Very good depth piece, if nothing else. And to bring in a little bit more depth across that D-line with those 2 guys, it's really big for us, man. We needed some bodies there.
Yeah, and Kamari Copeland, who was unable to play most of this season. I think he got hurt right after the Vanderbilt game with a torn tricep, wasn't able to play the rest of the season. That's kind of like bringing in a new guy to the rotation pretty much, because you didn't have him last year. That's someone who they were really excited about, was in a very crowded defensive tackle rotation. So remember, you also have him coming in, and he's a much bigger, stronger, physical guy than Nash is. So defensive line, I don't think it looks as great as it did going into last year, but there's definitely some good pieces there.
Yeah. Someone asked, has there been any news about the strength and conditioning coach? That was from JTM. Not that I'm aware.
Not that I'm aware either. Whether Tech goes internal with that one is my guess is where they'll lean.
But why wouldn't that be announced by now?
Pete, why isn't any of this announced by now? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it took our head coach and our AD like 2 weeks to meet with each other before the end of the season. So, like
those exit interviews, man, they're tough to schedule. What can I say? So
that might be one where you package with the defensive coordinator, or you wait till your DC is in the room to talk to him about it. They don't need, like, they probably have had their winter strength program built out already by people in-house. They're going to get those guys in the weight room doing what they need to do. So, they'll get it done. They'll get it done.
I can't imagine that search is still ongoing.
Dude, I don't know. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, it's Monday, January 13th. If Tech doesn't announce a defensive coordinator by Friday, I'm going to hit the worry button.
Yeah. Are you buying some of these rumors about us pulling a DC from like a sitting pretty good power 4 spot?
Football coaches love moving. I don't know if it's the smell of cardboard boxes or they just like fresh areas, but like college football coaches move a lot. Like, that's just kind of the nature of the profession. So it wouldn't shock me. I mean, right, like, look at what Penn State did. Tom Allen, former Big Ten head coach, defensive coordinator for 1 year at Penn State. He does, like, at best, a lateral move to Clemson. So
yeah, the Tom Allen one's interesting, but I think it's because
coaches do. My point is,
him and Dabo are boys.
That.
Like, they all have their certain networks, and if your buddy offers you a job, maybe you take it, even if it is a lateral move. That seems like what's happening with Tom Allen, and the reporting indicates he's going to leave Penn State and go to Clemson, which would open the door for Poindexter to be their lead defensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
Will James Franklin hire over him again?
Yeah,
we will find out, right?
I don't know.
We got a couple comments here. Bud in advisory role is running cover for a shitty DC hire. I hope not. I really hope not, because I
don't think Tech will go.
Defensive coordinator.
Tech won't go internal for defensive coordinator. I can almost guarantee you it will not be Sean Quinn.
No, I don't think so either. JTM says Tim Walton.
That's an interesting name.
He's at OSU. So
I mean, I think you have your home run hires, which would be, I think, Banks, who's currently at Tennessee, did not renew his contract. That is a name that has been floated around.
It's been floated, yeah, on the board.
Floated. I think Poindexter would be a great FU to UVA if you grab Poindexter. But I also think if you grab Poindexter, that means he would have been passed over 3 different times at Penn State. So
why would that be?
Yeah, that's not a great sign.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
Or maybe he just wants to come get out from under Franklin. I don't think it's going to be, at this point, I don't think it's going to be Poindexter. Let's just get that out there.
Pete, this is Virginia Tech. It's a mom and pop shop. Nick Sorensen is no longer the defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers.
That hit the boards last week too, Nick Sorensen.
I mean,
we could do worse than Nick Sorensen. I'm not saying that's who I want, but we could do worse.
I mean, he'd be better than the last 2.
Well, there's no doubt about that.
Okay.
I mean, the last 2 defensive coordinators that Virginia Tech hired had 0 experience at any D1 level of defensive coordinating.
Do you think Nick Sorensen could bring Greenlaw and Fred Warner with him? That'd be pretty sick.
I would love it.
Like Fred Warner playing against a bunch of 18-year-olds. That'd be hilarious.
Let's go. But yeah, man, I don't know. Like, have you heard the narrative? And someone's commenting to us too, but we were talking about this today. Do you think that we're striking out on our DC hire? Do you think that's what's happening? Or do you think we've known who it is and they're just not free yet? Or do you think that we're still vetting people? Like, I'm pushing back on the narrative that we've struck out.
Yeah, Virginia Tech has struck out in the past plenty of times. From what I have heard, and I'm far from inside Merriman access, but from what I've heard, by the bowl game, they still had not made a decision. And they had not made a decision because that coach was currently coaching.
That's
when they previously talked to that coach. So I don't know if it was like, that coach was still coaching January 3rd, or if that coach was still coaching like late December. Like,
and
I
is
don't
it
want to
an
get caught in
NFL
semantics
coach?
there. Yeah, is it an NFL guy? Like, it could be any of those. I mean, a name that hasn't been talked about, who's an NFL guy who is still coaching, and I know people hate it and they want to stop with the Hokies, but he's a Hokie, and he's a much beloved Hokie, maybe one of the most beloved Hokies. It was previously on staff. Pete, who is it?
Daryl Tapp.
Daryl Tapp is still coaching, and I'm just saying, like, there are a lot of options out there.
Yeah, but Daryl Tapp wouldn't be so much different than a Chris Marr.
No, it wouldn't at all. But I'm just
more
saying,
experience, but
like,
he hasn't
if
called plays.
If we're just throwing names into the ring, like,
I know.
I think Daryl Tapp is more likely than Sean Quinn. Like, that's what, like, I don't think Sean Quinn is even close to it.
Yeah.
I mean, they might have struck out on one or two guys, but that's how, I'm sure my employer struck out on a couple people before hiring me. That's how life works, Pete. I mean,
yeah,
you're not always first choice.
You got to be the guy in the right spot at the right time, right? So, all right. So just to close out the transfer thing, we have 17 total transfers now in this class and 20 freshmen coming in. That's 37 total new players for 2025, fourth most in the ACC. Syracuse has 42. Wake has 41, BC has 38, and we have 37. So it's funny when you look at the teams that are bringing in the most, like, those are not the teams you necessarily want to be associated with.
No, not really. I mean, Syracuse, we knew was going to have to do this because of the makeup of their roster. They had a ton of seniors who were running out of eligibility, and they had a ton of transfers who were running out of eligibility.
And that's us too, right? Like, we had a lot of veteran guys on this team.
Wake Forest makes a coaching change. That happens. Congrats on getting Washington State's roster. We'll see how that works out. I do like Jake Dickert though. And who is the other team in there?
BC.
BC. Yeah. Again, like, that's a
second year of a coach. Yeah.
Second year of a coach who needs to get his guys in there. Yeah. Right. So, it's a weird spot for Virginia Tech. I think, like, they could have won the national title this year, though, and still have been in this position in terms of roster turnover, right? Like,
and I agree with this comment from Matt. It's not good company, but for what Virginia Tech is right now, like, we needed to hit this portal hard if we wanted to be respectable next year.
If you want,
and we might upgrade at a handful of spots because of it.
Yeah,
hard to say.
Yeah, and I think they've been targeted too. Like, they've gone out and gotten positions that they need, and I think that's really good. They didn't go out and sign 2 quarterbacks or something like that.
Yeah,
they went out and got guys that they needed.
And the nice thing is what JTM just said right here, and we can cut off the transfer talk. But he said so far, Pry and company have done a pretty well pulling from the portal. Someone in there knows how to scout talent. And it's true, because we have had a lot of good portal additions over the last couple of years. And I expect several of the guys of these 17 to contribute and be good, a number of them.
Yeah. And you were always going to need to bring in 30 to 40 guys to fill out your roster, right? Like, guys were going to leave.
And it's also the teams that have more means are trying to add scholarships too. And so it is funny because, like, you're not seeing that from, the 4 schools that I named, but it's not like Miami is like 34. Like, it's not like these other schools are so far different than what Tech's doing. We just happen to be 4th most in the ACC. So we're waiting on the DC. We're waiting on strength and conditioning, but we can cut VT corner off there. Sam, before we get to our national championship preview, are you drinking anything tonight?
Yep. Woodford Reserve.
Sweet.
Double barrel. I'm drinking it with some, a little bit of honey.
That's the double oaked?
Yep, double oaked. A little bit of honey in there. It's showing up weird in the ring light, but
nice. You dropped the honey in yourself. Nice. I like it.
Yeah. Get a
Do you
little
do a
extra sweetness.
cubes? Do you do a neat? Like, what do you do?
These were like 3 big cubes that have kind of melted at this
Okay.
point. I will say, when I was pouring it, um, my dad mentioned to me that when he was growing up in Southwest Virginia, that whiskey and honey was their cough syrup. So I'm calling this cocktail now Appalachia cough syrup.
Hey, I like that a lot. The other day I went out in Philly on Friday, and I was talking to you guys on the thread about a penicillin. It's a
Mm.
drink. It's like a Scotch drink with ginger and honey infused in it.
Mhm.
Whatever. You can get them at a lot of different cocktail bars, or if you ask for one at almost any decent bar, they probably have it. But I got one on Friday, and it was awesome. Love a good penicillin. Keep an eye out if you see it on a menu somewhere, and grab yourself one of those. It was really, really good. I am drinking the Nocturnal Creatures from Double Nickel. This is a little dessert beer. Decided to. It was one of the ones I kind of bought it around Christmas, and it's some of them are like drink it now.
Mhm.
You want to drink it fresh. Other ones you can age and it doesn't matter. This was along the lines of a drink it fresh, so I wanted to get it in tonight. It's a imperial dessert stout brewed with cinnamon, vanilla, and churros. That's right. It's a churro stout. But look at this freaking thing. That is, I've been doing this for
Dark.
like half the season, Sam. I've been doing these dark ones, man. 10.3%, Double Nickels, one of my favorite Jersey breweries. They make a mean beer. This is really good. I would recommend it for a dessert stout. You're not going to be doing this any other, like if it's not cold or you're not just having one on the couch. Like this is not, let's go to the tailgate and have some churro stout. You're not doing that. This is a podcasting beer. And Matt put up, on our chat a funny one, but I'm not going to put it on the feed, but it was funny. And I'll give you the acknowledgement on that. All right, let's talk national championship, dude. Storylines of this game. There are a number of storylines. What do you think the number one storyline is?
It is like the unbeatable giant of the Ohio State roster, the most expensive roster we've seen in college football, versus like the return of the king in Notre Dame. And like that's really what it feels like. And so I think that the dichotomy of how these two rosters have been built. Now they both have transfer quarterbacks, and I think it is kind of funny. The national title will be decided between the Kansas State and Duke quarterbacks. But I
Cool.
think it is just the dichotomy of how these teams got there, and that's not a hit on Ohio State by any means. A lot of those guys they recruited to play at Ohio State, they just kept them from the NFL. But I think that's kind of that's the styles make fights emotionally for this game, and I think it's really interesting. And I'm glad we are keeping more high profile talent in the sport of college football. I think that's great.
It's happened a little bit in basketball, and it's happening more and more in college football, where we are keeping around the household names, and it makes it more fun. And you're also able to take these teams that may be lacking a quarterback, like Notre Dame and Ohio State this year. If they had kept Kyle McCord around, maybe they'd be right here. But Will Howard has had an amazing season, statistically, QBR, whatever else, and they find themselves in the national championship. Some other storylines. Marcus Freeman played for Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
First black coach in a national championship game. Very cool storyline. Ryan Day potentially sticking it to all of the haters by winning a Natty.
Ryan Day saving his job by winning a Natty would be pretty crazy, because we went into this playoff and it was not hyperbole to say like Ryan Day needs to win a national title or else they are going to fire him.
Yeah.
And here he is a game away.
Job at this point though? Like they couldn't fire him now, could they?
Dude, I don't know.
Or does he want to be there? Like what I'm wondering is after this season, does an NFL team come calling and say,
does he start saying like, man, the suburbs of Chicago are really nice, great summers?
And Marcus Freeman's been on those rumors.
Yeah, both of them have. I don't know what they do at this point. I think it is, in a way, it's a great coaching job by him to get all of this talent together and make it work. But I think it is also a great job. Like, it does feel like anybody could coach this Ohio State team to success. Like, they're that talented, right? And so I don't want to say, oh, this is a great coaching job by Ryan Day. He saved his job. He proved everybody wrong. Like, okay, he did a good job of like keeping people's egos down, but I don't think he really did anything that Joe Schmo coach could have done.
Well, it depends, but he's got two really good coordinators and
two great coordinators.
Whatever the kick in the pants that was needed after the Michigan game, he pushed the right buttons. Like, I don't know how all of that plays out, how you motivate your guys. Like, that falls on the head coach, and managing it all falls on the head coach. Mm-hmm. So he's done all that right.
Managing the talent in this day and age of football, I think, has been the most impressive thing he's done at Ohio State.
There's also the Lou Holtz thing. How about that? I wonder where Lou Holtz is right now. Well, we're back at that game. We've got Ohio State and Notre Dame. They played a season ago, ended with the controversial call, right? Or the call wasn't controversial, but the fact that Notre Dame had 10 minutes.
They had 10. No, they had 10. They had 10 on the field. Yeah.
And you already mentioned the thing about the quarterbacks both coming from like non-blue blood programs.
And they haven't played a lot, but it is a rivalry in that area. Like, I would say the two most supported college football teams in Ohio are Ohio State and Notre Dame. So it is a like regional, it is a rivalry that's not played on the field very often. So I think that is also very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they're pulling from the same
crop of people. Yeah.
And both of them recruit nationally, but when it comes to the regional recruiting, they're going head to head all the time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so it's definitely part of it. When I think about this game, and after watching Notre Dame lose multiple offensive linemen, I know the left tackle is not going to play. I'm not sure about some of the other guys. I don't know how they're consistently going to be able to move the ball on Ohio State.
Yeah, it does feel like consistent. Like, I think that's the key word, like consistently do it. Could they have some big plays? Yeah, I think they could. I think Texas left a lot of plays out on the field. And I think there is that X factor of Riley Leonard as a runner that Oregon didn't really use it. Didn't really have time to use it. Tennessee was able to do it with Nico. That's really the only way they were able to move the balls with Nico running. Texas really wasn't able to use it with Quinn Ewers. Probably should have used it. So I think there is a little bit of X factor that could be helping Notre Dame's offense a bit, other than Jeremiah Love just being insane and hopefully 100% healthy at this point. But I agree. I don't think Notre Dame is going to be able to put together 6 or 7 beautiful long touchdown drives in this game. I just don't think that's a possibility.
The other thing I think of after watching that game against Penn State is Riley Leonard took a little bit of a beating. Mm-hmm. It was 18 carries in that game, but if you look at the playoff in total, he's carried it 43 times. There's layoffs between those games, and I understand that, but it's after a season to then do that on top of it. He's got to be feeling it a little bit. You're missing a couple of O linemen. They're banged up on defense. And the Notre Dame defense is great. And I mentioned their pass defense and how elite it's been. With the similarities between Howard and Leonard, you have to just look at their weapons. And it's overwhelmingly in favor of Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, by far. It's in favor of Ohio State almost no matter who they play. Again, like I said earlier in the show, I think Notre Dame will have to do something a little bit different defensively than they've done all year. How do they respond to that? Now, the issue for Notre Dame is you don't have practice playing some of those, playing a whole game of certain zone coverages like that. On the other side, Ohio State doesn't have any film of you doing that. So it's going to be a really interesting coaching battle here between the Notre Dame staff, particularly Al Golden, and the Ohio State staff, particularly Chip Kelly. I think that's going to be really interesting. We'll see which team makes the best adjustments. And yes, JT, I know Notre Dame is in Indiana, but if you live in Ohio, especially northern Ohio, is the one house will have an Ohio State flag, the next house a Notre Dame flag, the next house Ohio State, the next flag Notre Dame. That's
And
just
that's,
what your
what's
neighborhood looks
funny is
like.
like in Pennsylvania, it's kind of like that. And in New Jersey, it's kind of like that. Like it's,
Yeah.
it's Rutgers and Notre Dame. It's Penn State and Notre Dame. Like that entire Northeast corridor from Ohio all the way over, there are so many Notre Dame fans.
Mhm.
And if you go to high school in those areas, like, they think about Notre Dame as a choice, as an elite choice. So they're definitely in that
Oh.
region. When I want to go back to the pass defense for Notre Dame.
Mhm.
I have said repeatedly it's number one, but that's going to be put to the test more than it has all season long.
Yeah.
Who do you think their hardest test was in the pass game this year, Sam?
Indiana?
USC,
USC,
Indiana,
USC,
Louisville.
just schematically, Indiana and USC, very good.
Penn State has a decent pass game.
Penn State, I mean, what they did to Drew Aller, like make fun of Drew Aller all you want. The dude's been really, really good, and they utterly shut him down. They are like some advanced stats for Notre Dame's pass defense. They're number one in EPA per dropback defense. They are number 22 in, they're number one in dropback success rate. Yeah, they're the best pass defense in the country.
Yeah, they are. They just are.
But they haven't.
They locked up.
Played.
I mean, Penn State wide receivers didn't have a catch. They didn't have a catch.
That's crazy.
Now they have not played someone as elite as Ohio State.
No.
And in fact, their worst passer rating against this year, Sam, NIU. They gave up a 150 passer rating to NIU.
Well, I'd also say, like, do we think that they are on par with Texas's defense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Look what Texas just did to them. Texas held them to 21 offensive points.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's true.
Are they on par with Michigan's or better? Like Michigan stifled them all game.
Oh man, this is a really good question. Like,
they might be the best defense Ohio State has played.
Very true. Very true. So I don't think the Oregon game still, like, as much as the Michigan game for Ohio State was an outlier, the Oregon game has to be an outlier too, right? Like that just what they were able to do in that game was just so crazy. They were amazing. So
they also beat the crap out of Tennessee. Now I thought Tennessee was I thought Tennessee could catch them sleeping maybe a little bit or catch them in a bit of a hangover. They did not, but oh my gosh. Yeah, Al Golden's been insane.
So let's go to the spread then. It's an 8.5 point spread.
Before you get to the gambling stuff real quick, the fact that is the same Al Golden that we saw on the sidelines for Miami blows my mind. It's not the same person.
It looks like a different
I don't know what alien replaced him, but it's not the same human being. They don't even look alike.
I know he does.
The pictures look nothing alike. Oh man.
And that was the storyline last week because he was a Penn State guy and he's coaching against them.
A Penn State tight end.
I want to go back to that point I made about the brackets. Do you think the Penn State and Notre Dame side of the bracket was meaningfully worse than the Ohio State Texas side of the bracket? I do. I think
I've landed on there pretty even.
Okay.
Because I thought Oregon was the best team throughout the course of the season, and Ohio State beat the crap out of them. Texas, I thought, was the best defense throughout the course of the season. I thought Arizona State was a matchup nightmare for teams. And I think Clemson was you didn't have to play Clemson's players as much as you had to play Dabo Swinney. And so I think they kind of evened out.
I just think that the combination of SMU, Boise, and Indiana.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
Like, it's just not. That's not Clemson, ASU, and Tennessee to me.
That's true. That's true.
And then you got Oregon and Texas as opposed to Penn State and Georgia. I don't know. At the later stages it gets more even, but I think at the broader stages it was worse.
Yeah.
Ohio State though had the hardest path in my opinion.
Yes.
All that being said, I feel like Notre Dame can cover this spread. I feel like they can. It's 8.5 as I last saw it. I feel like Notre Dame can cover. It wouldn't surprise me if Ohio State covered, but like after we've just talked about this on and off for an hour and a half, I just feel like Freeman has a little bit of that Kenny Dillingham stuff where you're like, doesn't really make sense, but I expect them to be there at the end.
Yeah, and it's like if there's a 4th and 1, right, at midfield, and either team needs a first down, no matter who's had the ball, which team are you going with to either get a stop or get the first down?
Ohio State.
You're going with Ohio State. I'd go with Notre Dame.
Really?
Okay. I just think that like in those type of plays that are so
I get you. No, I get 50, your point. 50, I get your point.
Yeah. I'm going with Notre Dame. And so I think there is, in terms of this spread, I think it's too big of a spread for me, numbers wise.
JTM agrees with you.
It's too big of a spread. So I like Notre Dame. I got them 9.5. I think it's down to 8.5 now. I have them money line at plus 320. It's down to plus 280, but I have them money line plus 320
on Notre Dame. Wow, that's awesome.
I will, however, probably sprinkle like a Ohio State team total.
So are you a hedger? Will you hedge regularly?
It depends. Depends on the situation. I for this game, like I think this game could go over. That's probably a more interesting conversation. The over or under right now is 45.5. That's really low. This game could go
pretty
over.
Low.
If this game's played in the 20s, it goes over.
We see a lot of championship type games go over.
Yeah.
Like when it comes down to it, like you said earlier in the show, like offense trumps defense. 45 is pretty low. Like I could definitely see this go over, especially with just like, even if it's from defensive stuff, right? Like you get Riley Leonard throwing a pick six or somebody fumbles and you get a scoop and score. I don't know.
JTM just asked which team has the better kicker. That'd be Ohio State. Because I've seen Notre Dame's kicker and I know he's kind of hot now, but Notre Dame was the worst effective field goal team coming into these playoffs by a mile. The kicker got hot, but if this comes down to a field goal, I like Ohio State.
All right. Well, that's a good way to end that discussion. I'm going to take Notre Dame plus 8.5. Natty says hammer the under. I think that's more just because he wants to give us hell.
Well, but no, I could.
I don't like generally like to play over unders. I like to pick a side. So
my over is a hedge in case Ohio State goes nuclear.
Yep.
Like if Ohio State all of a sudden, if Ohio State drops 35,
if they do the Oregon, yeah.
If they do the Oregon thing, which is possible. So.
All right, so that's going to close it out for our Natty preview. We are going to be back on the 20th, which is the night of the national championship, to have a live stream. So first quarter, we have an awesome guest lined up. Second quarter, a couple other guests. Guys from Sons of Saturday will be coming in and out, but still finalizing some of the details of who the guests will be, but you won't be disappointed. Last year we had Fuga and Holloway and Kyle Bailey and Dwight Vick and Bryce Chalkley. Like it was Bill Roth. Bill Roth was on the show. He led the show. He was awesome. So this year, I don't know if we can go that good, but we're going to try. We're going to try to
get somebody.
We're going to try to bring some heat. So,
and if you like beer talk, we're going to have some cool beers as well.
And Maddie's like, I'm not giving hell, which is nice. Thanks for watching, Maddie. Thanks for all the comments, JTM, Maddie, Thomas, all you guys that contributed to the chat. It was appreciated. This was a fun year of College Football Monday. This is the last regular show, I guess. Next week will be far from regular. I think in the fourth quarter, Sam, we're going to do we'll go 6 wide. We might go full panel, but we got to figure out who we want there, right? Like I know in the fourth quarter last year it got pretty loose.
Yeah, it's going to get loose. And I hope it's a good game. If this is a blowout, I'll be so sad. So I'm hoping.
I think it'll be good. I think it'll be a good game. All right, guys. Make sure you subscribe. Sons of Saturday feed on YouTube, Sons of Saturday feed and 2D feed on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And until next time, go Hokies.
Go Hokies.